first and foremost is what can you actually say? And I think a lot of people get confused by this because they think, oh, well, my family member or somebody I know or other activists have been prosecuted and they said a bunch of stuff and then that stuff came up at their trial. Or people think, oh, well, you know, I see people getting kicked off of Facebook for saying stupid stuff or saying whatever. Or I heard that, you know, certain laws restrict what you're allowed to say clearly, because if that wasn't the case, then how could we get in trouble? But the truth of the matter is, the First Amendment protects protects people from explicit viewpoint and content-based bans by the government, including in public forums, including in internet forums that are run by government officials. So one of my favorite cases that I've won was against a state legislator who used Facebook to as a public forum for people to come and, you know, talk as his constituents, and then he started banning everybody who criticized him. Because he was used to using Facebook the way anybody would use Facebook, which is, oh, I don't like you, I want to just get rid of you, go away. What he didn't realize is that as a government official, he's not allowed to do that. That even though Facebook is privately owned, when he goes somewhere and says, let's have a town hall, let's have a public space where people can talk, he's bound by the First Amendment. That means he can't target people based on their point of view. And that applies even on Facebook pages. Now, Facebook can delete your point of view because Facebook is a private company. But essentially, the First Amendment protects our rights to speak in any kind of public forum. That includes university campuses, that includes sidewalks, that includes other places like that. Now, what you can't say is you can't say, if you're on private property, including Facebook, you can't say what the private owner doesn't want you to say. That person can always kick you out. Wherever you are, you can't say things that involve immediate incitement. Immediate incitement is different from anything that sounds violent. So for example, in the 60s, there was a case where a guy from like the Ku Klux Klan, he went at this rally, he said something like, oh, the US government is corrupt, it's been taken over by our enemies, and so therefore this government must be overthrown. And they tried to prosecute him. And the charges actually got thrown out, because what they said was, him talking hypothetically about the overthrow of the government without the ability to like actually trigger any imminent action is not enough to prosecute somebody solely on those words alone. There's other restrictions that I don't think are really relevant. Defamation of character is one. So in other countries, defamation means whatever the government wants you to be, wants it to mean, where you say something about somebody that somebody else doesn't like. And sometimes that even applies to public figures. In America, defamation law is very different. If I say something about you personally that is factually false, then I might get in trouble for defamation. What counts as factually false as opposed to just a matter of opinion is important. So if I say, Lena is a bad person, I would never say that. But if I were to say that, that wouldn't count. That would count as an opinion statement. Now, if I were to say, the other day I saw Lena kick a puppy, and she just kept kicking the puppy over and over again. I don't know what she was doing. That's a factual statement. Also, something I hopefully will never say. That's a factual statement. It's a statement about the facts. And as a result of that, Lena can say, oh, well, now this guy's going around telling people that I kick puppies. That's not okay. And this one area where this has come up a lot is when people hear something like, oh, people in this community, you're an anti-Semite. So most people, I think, would say an anti-Semite is a factual thing. Either you discriminate against somebody or you don't. But the truth is, like, making accusations that somebody's a racist or something like that, that's considered an opinion statement. So it's actually protected speech. But again, defamation is another exception, and there's also restrictions on obscenity, which has been defined to mean like very extreme forms of like pornography. That being said, again, everybody in this community knows, wait, that can't be the whole story, because we've all said stuff, or we've had family members say stuff, and they've gotten in trouble. So how could it be that, with the exception of defamation, with the exception of immediate incitement, with the exception of what a private owner might not want you to say, how could it possibly be that we're allowed to express all these points of view? And I want to draw a distinction. One thing is that statements you make can generally still be used as evidence of an offense. that means, for example, if I go on Facebook and I say, oh, you know, I really, really hate my wife. 2 more minutes? Can I
Just
have
wrap
5
it
more
up.
minutes?
5, like 10, 15? No, sorry.
Okay.
2 minutes. We'll do this again. We'll have like whatever.
So where was I? I hate my wife. Okay. So I hate my wife. That's a statement I'm allowed to make. But let's say my wife turns out missing. People think maybe I killed her. They can use that statement in court and say, well, we're not going after you for making a statement. We're going after you for killing your wife, and this statement is used as evidence. The other thing is that acts of speech can be seen as providing a service. And in a very important case that's relevant to this community, the Supreme Court ruled that providing certain kinds of services can be an act of support for terrorism. So things like telling somebody who is a member or who you think is a member of what the U.S. government calls a foreign terrorist organization, which is whatever the U.S. government wants to call a terrorist organization. There's no real statutory restrictions on who that is. But if, for example, if I were to tell somebody from a foreign terrorist organization, or if I were to coordinate with them, and I were to say certain things and provide them certain services through the act of speech, like, for example, it doesn't have to be quote-unquote terrorism related. This could be things like providing translation services. Even using my mouth, just speaking. The Supreme Court has ruled that, well, that's not a restriction on the content, that's a restriction on you providing training to specific groups of people. And when they can't get away with the foreign terrorist organization restriction, sometimes they say you're engaged in a criminal conspiracy with groups that are involved in terrorism. So this is how they've gone around it. Now, I don't have time to go over additional.
You get 3 minutes since it's relevant. Just hurry.
It's a good way to stop. And that's essentially a question of prosecution. Now they have the additional issue, and we face the additional issue of, well, when can they search us? Because there's a difference between searching somebody and prosecuting them. That's another question that people don't understand the restriction. The truth is that speech activity on its own can be collected by the government, including the way they did during the COINTELPRO years, provided they don't violate your privacy. And they found all of these new ways to just get around that. So one thing is stuff you say in public, like on Facebook. If it's available to the public, their attitude is, well, then why can't we look at it? You're saying it to everybody else, and it's not our fault that you're saying it to a bunch of people that are government informants. You're saying it in public, so why can't we take it? But then they take things like what counts as public and distort them. So for example, when you send a letter to somebody, the idea is, oh yeah, you know what, we were wrong to open all those letters without a justification, without some legal cause. But you know what you write on the letter, like the information, like the to so-and-so and you know this address and so on, that's on the outside of the envelope, so we can look at that, that's public. And then they started doing that for saying, well, you know, when you call the telephone company and when you try to call a particular number, whatever you're saying on the phone call is one thing, but the fact that you called this person, that's public. You're telling the phone company that you're calling this number, and somebody knows that at the phone company, so I guess you must not really think it's very important. Or, hey, you know what, you're texting this person, and here's the time that you're texting them, and here's the time you're emailing them. Essentially, they found all these new ways to say, well, we can gather this information that you're revealing to the public anyway. And so these are the kinds of, again, I have, we'll talk more during this conference, and of course I'll be speaking on Sunday.
Yeah, we're gonna, yeah.
And so we can,
talk strategy then.
yeah, and so we can talk more about strategies behind political organizing, but what I wanted to make clear was COINTELPRO is essentially still with us in this way. But the important thing is we should not read that to mean, oh, we can't do anything. What we should read that to mean is if we know what the rules are and how they justify it, actually we can speak very effectively because we just need to know what we're allowed to say. And the truth is that those restrictions are actually clear. They're just confusing sometimes in practice.